Hello, and welcome to the RPS Developer Session at Rezzed. This is the first one, exciting. And we are here with the Knights and Bikes crew. This is Moo. Hello. And this is Rex.
Hello.
Excellent. Moo does the programming side of things mostly, and Rex does the art side of things. And so I figured we'd do a little bit about the game, and then the pre-Kickstarter, and then the Kickstarter, and then some post-Kickstarter, just as a kind of partitioning. So the game itself is this cool little action, adventure, kind of exploration thing that you guys have described on the website as little girls kicking up hell on a small British island in the 1980s, which is an excellent description. And I was wondering if you could flesh that out just as a kind of which bits of that you want to focus in on, the actual sort of the island that's involved, the mystery side of things. Just tell me a bit more about how that translates into game.
Well, I mean, essentially the game is about us just wanting to really get to the core of what it's like to be a kid, you know, and just be kind of naughty and be over the top and have too much energy and too much excitement and too much imagination. And you're on your bike and you're going downhill and you haven't even bought any brakes for it yet, and you're just splashing through puddles and you're just having adventures. And that is very much the kind of atmosphere that we're trying to get all the time with Demelza and Nessa, these two girls that are growing up on this Cornish, I should say Cornish island, really. I mean, I don't say that for the big marketing, because most people are like, where's Cornwall? But it is a Cornish island.
It's Penfersey, right?
Penfersey, yeah.
I've done my research.
Very good, yeah.
And this is, as you can see on the big screen, this is all stuff from the game, and the artwork is so adorable. So, yeah. But, one of the things that I'm interested in is how you guys came up with the idea for the project in the first place, how you even met. You guys worked together on Little Big Planet, right? Yeah, so if you could just tell me a bit more about how Knights and Bikes came into being.
So as you said, we met working together on Little Big Planet, but we kept together over the years. I'd done some smaller projects that when I was just desperate for art help, Rex, helped me out with little bits and pieces. But yeah, we've always kept in touch, and Rex sort of came to me with this idea of, making something that was about being kids. And I think the touch point you referenced was Goonies. And it's really funny because I went back and found a DVD of Goonies. I was accosted by the guy at Computer Exchange saying what is this? It was I've never heard of this. But going back and watching it and just comparing what I remember of it to, what it actually was. And it was just really interesting just how much I infused that with what it was like to be a kid and how I remembered it and that kind of stuff. And so I think we started out with that as a touching point. And then over, all this time, we just kept iterating and changing bits and pieces and adding more of our own personal experiences into it. And I think that's sort of how we came to this vision that we currently have for Knights and Bikes.
Okay. In the press build that I've played, you spend your time going around a part of the island which is like a theme park kind of thing, a run-down theme park that's closed, I think, and you are trying to find a librarian. And so I was wondering if you could sort of tell me a bit more about how that fits into the overall scope of the game. Who is this librarian, and sort of what are you overall?
Yeah, so there's, perfect timing. The islanders are missing. So people are going missing from the island. It's kind of, the kids have got all of their own imagination, and they're kind of, you don't know how much they're misinterpreting things, but something is definitely, amiss on this island. And they're trying to get to the bottom of it, and various people are going missing, like the librarian. And we're always trying to bring, the game is sort of the fantastical meets the mundane. So, this librarian, she doesn't have some tower that's built out of books that she's, inhabiting and casting spells or anything. She's just a librarian, and she's in her little mobile library van, which she drives around the island, and it breaks down occasionally, and it's very sort of everyday. And she's just one of the characters that can help the girls out, you know, they're trying to save her essentially along the way.
Okay. And so one of the things that we've spoken about before was the importance of the bikes kind of element of the exploration, because that's the moment when a lot of the time as a kid you feel like you can actually go out and there's an exciting sort of set of exploration that comes with that, and you can actually, you know, it's, I guess, your first taste of independence.
Definitely.
And I was wondering if you could...
Yeah, no,
elaborate.
exactly. I mean, you know, I grew up on a farm. I couldn't go anywhere. You know, I mean, you've kind of got all this space to roam, and it's kind of exciting to, you know, find lakes and fields that you didn't even know existed on the farm. But essentially, you can't like get that far away. And when I got my first bike, you know, that kind of opened the world up a bit more, and I could actually go and visit friends. And you know, it was a very sort of pivotal moment. You know, along with discovering video games, for example.
Is that something that you tried to build into the game, like that moment of the actual freedom that it offers? Is that gated off to you at the start, or is it something that you have from the very beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you don't have your bikes at the very beginning of the game, and then, you know, as you get your bike, then you can go a little bit further, and then as you upgrade it, then you can go further still. So, you know, just like the Goonies here, you know, you're adding on your flags, and you're adding on your extra brakes, and your what else have we got?
Tires and flashlights.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
yeah.
I mean,
Do you
some
have
of
the little clackers that you can
of
put on the
course.
spokes?
Yeah. And we've,
So
if you've actually visited our stand here, we've got some bikes that we put together ourselves, and I can tell you those are very painful to put a few hundred of those on with your thumb. You know, it's like, you know, I don't think either of us will be able to do anything with a mouse for a few days.
Your kid self is just looking at you like, oh, for goodness sake, you know, you need the stamina. Come on.
Yeah, need to level up. Yeah.
And so in terms of the actual sort of the way that the game plays, one of the things that I really loved when I played it was how a lot of the time you're not just traversing an area, you get little, like, you have little races with Nessa or with Demelza, and you can kind of actually, it feels very true to that kid sense of, I'm going to be the first to that tree, or okay, like, I will wrestle you for the thumb war, kind of, you know. Is that, how did you hit on that, and how did you, was it a case of looking at the kids you know and, you know, figuring out how they move around, or?
Yeah, I think we sort of came to that from two different angles. So one angle was that we had the two girls, and we, you know, worked on their cooperation a lot, and like how, you know, for example, they can do their attacking moves together, Nessa can make puddles, and Demels can splash in them. And we thought, you know, there needs to be a little bit of an angle there, you know, a little bit of conflict as well. So we thought, like, what if we had competitions between them where, you know, they both want the same thing, they have to, you know, fight for it in a very playful, friend kind of way. But the other side of things is just that idea of being a child, and like, there is the reality around you, and there's the boring reality that adults see, but then there's also the reality in your head and all the things that are important. Whether it's, you know, I'm going to walk down the road without stepping on any sidewalk cracks, or I'm going to be the first one to get this race. But also in like the loot system we have, it's like they're not collecting like precious metals or gems or anything like that. They're collecting whatever, you know, kids like to collect. So it's, you know, stuff like owl pellets and, you know, finger puppets and, you know, that kind of stuff. And it's just much more about the things that are important to you as a child and how we capture that essence into the game.
It was very much, when I was looking at the things that I was picking up as I moved around, it was very much the sort of things that my mum used to dig out of my blazer pocket and be like, why?
Yeah.
What is this? Why string? So yeah, that was really successful.
Yeah, I was so into owl pellets. You know, I mean,
Really?
they turn up.
Is this the farm? Is
Yeah,
it just,
yeah. Well, you know, obviously it helps to have some owls nearby if you're into owl pellets. Yeah, and just
bereft of
like
owls.
dissecting them and finding all these like little bird skulls and like trying to work out how many things that the owl had eaten that day. And you know, I think as kids you just go down these funny little rabbit holes of just getting really obsessed with like detail like that, and actually like the sort of icky disgustingness, you know. I mean, I think a lot of people can say, oh, it's a very, you know, beautiful, maybe like cute game, but I think we want to get that feeling of just the the kind of disgustingness that you're into when you're a kid as well. You know, you're into like slime and bogies and dead animals and poking things with sticks and, you know, maggots and all of this stuff that's all under the surface.
There's a grubby earthiness there as well.
Yeah.
Something that I really love is the like the way that Nessa and Demelza are animated and how they look anyway. It's kind of like a messy, because they've been running around way of doing things, and there's very much a kind of like furrowed brow, tongue out, concentrating on important kid business kind of
yeah, exactly. They're taking this stuff very seriously. You know, I mean, kids are not messing around. Yeah, and I think with the way it animates, I wanted to get this sort of like line boil style, where, you know, like the old cartoons of like Rhubarb and Custard. I'm showing my age now, but you know, every single frame is jittering and moving, and I think that's a good way of like conveying this sort of built-up energy that they've got inside themselves. You know, that every sort of molecule of their body is just like vibrating with just wanting to go and have the next race, or, like, you know, discover a new area, or just jump in a puddle.
Yeah. And the other thing about the game is that there's a single-player ability to do it like that, but there's also the co-op, which is really lovely. And I was wondering how that worked in terms of balancing the two, making it so that it works equally well in both regards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, co-op games have just been really, really, really important to me since I moved to the UK. So, you know, I lived in America, single for 20 whatever years, moved to the UK, met my girlfriend, who's now my wife, immediately. And it just changed my perspective on video games very quickly from, you know, before it used to be, I want to play something like Final Fantasy because I want the longest amount of time that I'm separated from the real world, and I don't want to deal with it anymore. And suddenly video games became this thing to me of like, oh, it reminded me of when I was a kid, and like we used to just trade cartridges, go to each other's houses and play, and video games were just a thing that always brought people together. And it was this moment in my life where I was just like, well, I need to find more games that I can play with my wife, because that's what this medium is great for. It's this thing that you can do together, it's active. Like, I think in the modern day, it's so easy to like put on a film, be on your phone the whole time, do whatever, but like video games demand your attention and demand your attention together. And so it just was one of those things of like, you know, one of the reasons I moved here to work on Little Big Planet was it was a co-op game, and I just felt like I was missing that from when I was a kid, and I used to make all my friendships through video games, that kind of stuff, and I just wanted to bring it into Nights and Bikes. So from a balancing perspective, it wasn't so much that I was like, well, you know, it's going to be like balanced this way, and it's a really nice, clever way to do this. It was that I thought this game needs to be co-op, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. And so there's a lot of like custom code for any like the co-op puzzle bits to make sure like the other player will play along and do the puzzle bits for you, but they also don't get ahead of you and do them before you're ready and that kind of stuff. So like, I think it always came from the idea that I really love co-op games, and I have so much time in my life for them, and I feel like there's so few that are out there in the market, and I just felt like I wanted to make something to contribute to that.
Okay, and in terms of the co-op elements that then manifest as, I guess, the more flourishy sort of environment building touches. I remember you were saying that they can high-five each other when you're playing co-op. Can you leave one of them hanging yet?
Yes, very, very importantly, because it's all about timing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at your elbow as well. That's, that's the key. I mean, you don't actually have to do that in the game. It's kind of hard to do that in a 2D game.
I was going to say we could try, but
elbow?
it would just be totally embarrassing if we
would.
managed to not. I was just like, take your glasses off.
We can do a
or
high five
something.
at the end. But I've lost my train of thought for some reason.
Leaving
high
you
fives.
hanging.
Oh, yes. So, it's all about getting that timing, making that connection. And if you get it wrong, or you just walk away, then the other one's like, hello, hey, hey. And, you know, it sort of says left hanging, and they feel a bit sad. And, that's just one way of making the characters, like, you know, physically interact with each other. You know, obviously there's, you know, you're doing lots of combat, and you're cooperating together on puddle, one throwing down the water balloons and making puddles, and the other one splashing in them. But I think also there's all those moments of like the high five, a little moment of celebration that gives you both a little boost to, like, you know, help you with the next section. but also like the moment where one of them loses all their health, you know, they're just going to be like lying there on the ground, and it's up to you to go and like take them by the hand and like help them back up onto their feet. You know, there's like a physical moment where you've just, you know, really helped each other.
I just want to add, it's important that both of you can leave the other one hanging. So the first person can hold down circle to put their hand up. And when the other person goes to give you a high five, you can also drop it. It's like too slow.
Sneaky.
So both ways.
I like that.
Harsh.
You could implement the really complicated, you know, like up high, down low, slow. Kind of. Oh, I'll help. I'll consult. It's fine.
Maybe we'll upgrade to a patty cake game as well.
And like Cat's Cradle or something. Also
Whoa.
good. Very complicated.
I'm not looking forward to animating any of this.
So another thing that I was interested in is this. So obviously it was looking to things like the Goonies for inspiration for that very 80s feeling of kids investigating mysteries and sort of seeing things that grown-ups are just sort of brushing away as inconsequential and having these adventures. And I was wondering how you make sure that you keep the sense of that as you're developing a game. Is there a particular like checklist, or is it more about like playtesting and seeing whether people use particular words when they talk about it, or how do you maintain that?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one, because I think because we know that's always been our primary goal, is this sense of adventure, this sense of excitement, it's so hard to implement something without it. I think, you know, we always prototype stuff and we'll implement like a first pass and a second pass, and if it ever feels flat, like, or if it ever feels like, oh, this isn't, you know, over the top enough. Like, I feel like almost, you know, most of the features that we implement, we sort of go over the top first, and how do we tone it down to be not ridiculous? Because I feel like we already know that we really want that high energy, this sense of adventure and that kind of thing. I think it's in everything we think about, and it's almost like if something didn't have that aspect to it, it probably wouldn't even get mentioned as an idea we try. So it would sort of get culled first place. You know, I think we almost always start with ideas that are over the top and ridiculous and just say, how can we actually do this? Okay, maybe we can't.
That's fun.
I think it's important you just follow your heart, though, really. You know, it's not really, I mean, obviously all the feedback we get, we process it, but you have got to follow your own, you know, what you're trying to do yourself, and not like get too, like lose track as you go.
So you know how I mentioned that structure that I was going to follow with the pre-Kickstarter and the Kickstarter and the after, and how that's completely fallen by the wayside. Should we talk about Kickstarter? Because that's when I first became aware of the game, because it had just this amazingly vibrant pitch and was absolutely festooned with GIFs of these wonderful animations, and it had so much sort of energy just popping off the web page. And so I was wondering, I guess, how you approached that and how you picked out the things that you hoped people would respond to, and just the process of being on Kickstarter and making that work.
I guess I'll start with like the idea of Kickstarter, because I think there's a lot of different ways to fund a game and to make a game. And I think the thing that was most appealing to me about Kickstarter was the idea that the internet is so loud nowadays, and you know, you never know what to listen to and what's important and where it's coming from. And I think, you know, it's easy to fall into that trap of, oh, loads of people are saying all these things about your game, but there are people that would hate it no matter what. And I thought Kickstarter was one of those amazing situations where, you know, you can sort of put it out there and no one's going to back the game if they're not interested in it. And if they're not sold on your vision, then they're not going to come along. And so we kind of have this group of people that we always know that they're bought into the same vision that we are. And so if we do something and they react, you know, really strongly about it one way or the other, we know that that sort of like comes from the same place that we're coming from. Where, you know, when you just get random information off the internet, you never know really where it's coming from, if you should be listening to it, how much weight to give it to it, and that kind of stuff. But in terms of like how to actually bring the whole thing to life, that was mostly in Rex's court.
Yeah, oh, flashbacks. Oh. Yeah, it's, I think for me, because obviously like doing a Kickstarter campaign is very video-led. You know, I don't think there'd be many people that would back a campaign without watching the kind of trailer pitch video. And that's kind of my background in the past has been making videos for, say, Little Big Planet, all the trailers there. And when I moved up onto Tearaway and became like the game lead on it, I wanted to try and treat a trailer as almost like the design doc. You know, I think, you know, when you're making a game, you often have this sort of dusty design doc that no one reads, and it completely gets ignored because it's just very it's very mechanical and very dry, and it doesn't have any like heart or emotion in it. And through making a video and getting the right audio on there, you can really help the team that's making the game like really sort of, well, really understand it in its entirety. It's maybe not got anywhere near as much detail, but if the tone is right, then everyone on the team can like contribute to that vision and, you know, come up with their own ways to make it successful. So, you know, we kind of did the same thing for the Kickstarter video. The main difference was that obviously it was very early in the development process, so we didn't actually have a lot of game. So a lot of it was like building small areas of like representative areas of the game, still done in the engine, in Unity, but making sure that they would communicate like the wider scope of the game. So it wasn't, you know, just sort of
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you know, obviously, like, a thing I was really terrified about is that you are promising something to people, and you know, I don't want to let them down. So I kind of, you know, we need to believe in what we're doing, that it's achievable before we can like ask other people to give us money. Yeah, I don't want to be a fraudster.
Feels like it worked, and that you've had a successful, or rather a positive experience in the time since as well, with backers sort of offering feedback or sort of engaging in that kind of dialogue that has been useful for the development of the game, and also in terms of, like we were saying before we came on stage, the game is taking slightly longer than you'd initially thought, but then people are like, well, we'd rather have it done right, so sure.
Yeah, I think something we were very conscious of when we were designing the Kickstarter campaign is like we got lots of advice from people saying like, oh, this is how you optimize revenue, this is how you make the most money, here's do this and do this. And like for me, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to like create the right filter for people that were interested in the game or not. It wasn't like how to get the most money. And I think that's paid hugely back to us, in that the people that did back the game, they're hugely supportive. You know, they have given us all kinds of like new ideas. Like, you know, one of the pieces of loot that's in the game is like a bread clip, which was like a Kickstarter like brainstorming session that we did, and they've just been so supportive. And like even when they're not actively engaging, like you always know they're there in the back of your mind. So it's like, I think sometimes on smaller teams it's hard to keep all the motivation, but when you know there's, you know, 5,000 backers out there waiting for this game and they're really excited about it, and every month you post a backer update and they just say the nicest things to you, it's really easy to keep that motivation going. So I think it's just, I'm really glad we did it. I'm really glad we have that community behind us. And I think even moving forward, as we get further and further along in the game, it'll be more important to have that group, you know, there for us.
Okay. I'm going to keep asking questions, but I believe we're going to pop a microphone on where the white cross is in the middle. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Moo and Rex, then we can always like come to you, but I will just ask one more while you have a little think. And that is something that's been super interesting to me, especially over the last 12 months actually, is how different people are approaching ideas that seem really rooted in nostalgia or in going back to ideas from, for example, the 80s. I know we, in emails, have mentioned things like Stranger Things, and I was wondering how you feel Knights and Bikes fits into that, and how you balance nostalgia with new and don't let one overwhelm the other.
Well, I think it is a case of, you know, like we were saying earlier, of like having a touch point of, like, for us it was the Goonies, but also then adding all of your own experience and all of your own twists and turns to that. I mean, maybe controversially, I kind of thought that Stranger Things was a very nice package, but I didn't think it actually had like enough stuff other than like a greatest hits of the 80s. I would have liked like a bit more of like a unique element coming in. So, you know, see what they do with Series 2. But, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, it definitely comes down to me about like sort of the more fundamental part of it. Like I think there's a lot of games that will rehash a game from the past, and I think, you know, there's a lot of games that are inspirations for me for this game, but I very much focus more on the experiences that I had in playing those games rather than what the in-game features were. So I mean, Secret of Mana is something I draw from heavily because one of my best friends from that era, like, you know, Secret of Mana was the game we played together all the time. And it was great in that, like, on any given night, you never knew if he was gonna call you and say, I'm stuck at this boss, I need you to come over to my house and play it. And it was just that kind of, you know, that, like, in such a dumb way, knowing that this other friend needs you sometimes, you know, and you know, we're these boys who are trying to be all brave and that kind of stuff. So it's like we're not very emotional in the real world, but then like obviously in the video game world, it causes these interactions that we had. And I think for me, it's all about, you know, creating something that will evoke those same kinds of experience for kids or adults today that I, you know, had the joy of experiencing because of video games when I was younger, rather than, oh, this was a popular thing in video games, let's do that again. You know.
Okay, we have a question.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's very loud.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous, so sorry about
So
that. I wanted to talk about that Kickstarter video, and one of the things I really loved was the music, and I just wanted to get the background of just the what was behind the music sound and what the inspiration was for the music, and can we see that in future?
Yeah, so although it's just the two of us working on, you know, the full time on the game, we're collaborating with two friends. One called Kenny, who was audio director at Media Molecule, and he did all the sound design for Little Big Planet and for Tearaway as well. And he's not only that, but he's just a great influence to have around. You know, he's got a really wicked sense of humor, and I don't know, he just sees the world in an interesting way. I think it's because I'm from Cornwall, he's from Scotland, so we're, you know, sort of coming at it from two different angles. So he's doing sound design, and then another friend, Daniel, who I worked with him first on the Movies game at Lionhead way back in the day. And he's a fantastic composer. He also did the main theme for Little Big Planet. And then he's kind of gone off. He's like Mr. Hollywood now. He did, what's he done recently? Steve Jobs, yeah, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So, but he, you know, he was really excited about the concept of the game. He loves taking something that could almost be a pastiche and then twisting it massively. And he's done a similar thing. You know, sometimes when he was playing early cuts of the music to me, I was worried that it didn't sound 80s enough. And I think he got it just right, where, you know, it's not just like, oh, well, let's use every synthesizer, and, you know, as you're hearing the music, you're just imagining like neon reflecting in a puddle as someone plays saxophone in the background, and, you know, it's not like super 80s cliche. It's just subtly the 80s world meets a kind of more ancient, an ancient story behind it. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say that much about the process because he's so instinctual. And for our demo that we've got here, he literally did all the music in that sort of live in about an hour, while I was saying we've got about an hour, and so you know, he practically plays it all live. So yeah, he's a great guy to collaborate with, and he'll be working on the wider score as we go forward.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, equally nervous. So I didn't even know about this game before. I came along because just sheer interest. But it's how did you figure out the gameplay you wanted to make for this? Because your style is really great, and I find that often people have really good idea for what their art and music are, like the the world building, but they don't necessarily have the gameplay that matches up with that. How long did it take you to like figure out this is how I want this to play? Like, how many iterations did you go through?
So it definitely took a while, but I think the thing that we started with that we always knew is that we wanted this really high energy experience. And I think the other thing that we always wanted is friendship. The idea of like what it's like to make friends, to, you know, get into fights, to argue, but to, you know, make up and that kind of thing. So like a lot of the gameplay was about like, you know, what are the kinds of situations that we can create where they need to work together or work against each other. So a lot of the combat is just like, well, what kind of moves could we give, you know, one of them that the other one could play off of, or like, what kind of puzzle can we create that, you know, two people would have fun actually going through together. So it was a lot of these kinds of gameplay elements of like, how do we make people in the real world, you know, like collaborate and figure stuff out. And it's been really great because obviously you do all this stuff in theory and you try lots of different stuff, but bringing the demo to the public and just watching how people interact, you know, it's like whether it's like there's a little race sequence and like people always get super like amped up about that, or like, you know, we have like inhalers in the first section and it's like it's so often that people laugh at each other when their inhalers brought out and that kind of stuff. And I think that was always the important thing for me, was just like finding ways to make people behave in certain ways in real life. But yeah, it took lots and lots of iterations. One of the things I did after the Kickstarter campaign is I went back and like recovered all the old builds and prototypes of the game. And it was mind-blowing because I don't remember it being, one, that bad, but two, so different. Like it was just a fundamentally different game. And I'd say we probably went through like 2 or 3 really big iterations, but like on everything we do, it's like, you know, there's probably 10 or 20, if not more, micro iterations on everything.
Thank you very much.
And also, like, just focusing on the game feel, you know, like from my side on the art, you know, of just trying to make sure I don't get carried away. And, you know, nearly every animation I've done, I make it all. I feel really pleased with it, and then I delete 80% of it because, you know, nobody actually wants to stand there and just watch all the reaction shots, you know, after they've pulled off a special move. They just want to get on. So, yeah, delete. I'm a big believer in designing by deleting.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Hey there. I was just wondering what it was like transitioning from working on a larger team, say being at Media Molecule, to when it's just the two of you, because it's just quite extraordinary seeing the amount of stuff you've produced just with you two guys, and like what it's like, the dynamic, how that shifts, and how you found it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very different. You know, you don't have as many voices to draw on, like within the room. But you know, obviously, you know, we've got 5,000 people, you know, that have backed us, that we can, you know, sort of try and draw some like health from. And yeah, and it's, you know, it's, although we're working super hard, it's kind of quite relaxed as well, in that, you know, I can just get up in the morning and draw stuff and play with my cats, and draw stuff and play with my cats, and, you know, it's kind of, I don't know, it just keeps you topped up on energy.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of weird. Like, I definitely have a long history of going from big studio, tiny project, big studio, tiny project. And for me, it's just about learning new things. I think when you're in a big studio and you have some big flaws, there's always super talented people to pick up all the bits and pieces for you. And so it's great to work on something really small because you see all your flaws. But then it's great to go back to a big studio and where there's people that know all those things that you can learn from and develop from. So I love like going back and forth between those two things, so I can like, you know, have to face how bad I am at everything and then go somewhere where people will teach me to be better at those things.
That's great, thank you.
Hi. Hi, sorry.
It's okay.
Kids being notoriously quite hard to write for, how did you manage the tone of writing the game?
By being really bad at being a grown-up. I don't know. Yeah, I think, again, it's kind of a mixture of like just the randomness of just how their minds will just switch onto like the, you know, the coolest new thought that just popped into their mind, or like the complete 180, you know, on some decision, or, you know, they're just constantly like processing input and responding to it in ways that you don't expect. So trying to, yeah, just be as unexpected and excitable as possible.
Would you say it is for children? Like, would you say that you're writing a game that kids can play, but you're mostly sort of thinking for people who are maybe my age, or is it that you have specifically tried to?
I mean, I kind of hope that it's for both, but I guess, I mean, obviously, like a lot of the references are to things from like 30 years ago, so there's probably like more stuff for them to process.
Yeah.
But I kind of hope that it will inspire the next generation to like put down their iPhones and pick up an owl pellet.
Or create their own stick shop as they walk past a tree. That's what I used to do with my kid brother. The last thing that I just wanted to make sure that we said before we wrap up is if people are interested in playing, and if, for example, this was the first time hearing about the game, where can they find it on the show floor afterwards? Where can they hunt you down and play your game?
I have to do all kinds of complicated pointing gestures. Kind of out of here and down there and round a bit. Opposite Nintendo.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're
You'll know them
in the
by
Double
now.
Fine booth, along with Ooblets and who else is Full Throttle and Gang Beasts. So it's a good party atmosphere in there. We've got our little bikes in there. You can sit on a bike. It's quite impressive seeing I've seen guys in big like biker T-shirts with unmentionable things written across the back, sitting on a tiny bike with stabilizer wheels, honking a horn and playing our game. So, that's a pretty good outcome.
That is excellent. Very photographable as well. Awesome. I will lurk and see who's doing what. Okay, I believe that is everything from us. And at 4 o'clock, I think it is William Pugh doing William Pugh things, if you would like to come back. And yeah, just thank you to Moo and Rex, and good luck with the game.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone.